bracket is out. It's been out for a little while now, but just a refresher for you. Here's what it looks like. On the far right, you've got the teams with the double bye. Illinois, Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Purdue. On the far left are the games that start this evening on the Big Ten Network. The first one is 6 Eastern, 5 Central, Nebraska and Northwestern. Remember, the Huskers are red hot right now. The late one is Minnesota and Penn State. Both those games this evening, both right here on the Big Ten Network. We are going to break them both down, specifically those games tonight, a little bit later on in the show. But you alluded to it, just sort of the big picture of how excited you are for this tournament. This has been a really good year. Last year was another really good year in the league. This one, again, slightly different. What has you most excited about this weekend, Henry?
Well, I think I said every game, I think every team has something to play for. So that's what I'm really excited about. You know, no matter who you are, you got something to play for. I think when I look at these matchups to start the weekend off and look into Thursday especially, of course, IU and Michigan, I think we'll get into that a little bit more because that's a crucial one for both teams. But Maryland and Michigan State, I think this is going to be a really good matchup. These teams just played each other. And Michigan State just rolled them in that first half. Maryland played much better in the second half. Fats Russell in the past month or so, I thought he should have been. I would have had him on my third team, all Big Ten. He's been playing phenomenal as well as any lead guard in this conference. So I think this is going to be a really good matchup between these two teams that just face off. I
didn't hear much complaining about the first, second, third team all Big Ten. That's the only thing that was sort of like an asterisk I heard people saying is like, man, Fats Russell has been so good recently. Maybe he should have been higher up on that list. And on the flip side, in that game, Tom Izzo's as good as anybody ever in the history of this tournament. He has more titles than any head coach. He has more wins in this tournament than any coach. That is going to be a fascinating matchup.
And here's what I like because, you know, Tom Izzo knows what he's doing in March. I think Michigan State could win this tournament. Okay, there's been much talk about what type of team they are. They don't have the go-to guy. A.J. Hogarth's had some sickness I think he's been dealing with since that Purdue win where he was so good. When he's playing at a high level, Michigan State's very, very good. And they have the depth. If they win one or two games, I like their chances come Sunday because of their depth. They throw many guys at you. They're athletic. They're deep. And then Maryland has some talent to cause some damage too. I think especially when Fats Russell and Eric Ayala are playing better, playing well. I mentioned Fats Russell's been as good as anybody over the past month. Eric Ayala in the last 3 games, he's averaging 19 points. He really wasn't playing well for a while. I think he was banged up a little bit. He's emerged in recent games. I think those two guys together in the backcourt could do something here.
This is an early matchup you're most excited for. I want one more thing on it before we get to more big picture stuff. So here's what concerns me about Michigan State. Last year, Dwayne Washington Jr. takes over, right? Has like 92 points in the tournament. Does Michigan State have someone? Is there anybody that you feel? I know they have a lot of players who are good. Do they have someone who can take over a tournament?
Look, I didn't say they're my pick to win it, Mike, all right? I just said I think they have the potential to win
Fair
it.
enough.
I don't think they have one guy. Here's the deal with them. It might be one guy. It might be Tyson Walker against Maryland.
Okay.
But the next game, it might be Malik Hall. The next game, it might be A.J. Hogarth. So it's not going to be one guy that's going to tear through 4 games and do it for him, but a number of guys that could step up on that particular night.
How about what's the potential matchup that you're most looking forward to seeing this week?
They're all going to be good. I'm really looking for the Iowa Rutgers. I think these two teams both are capable of winning it. Okay, I really like, in fact, whoever emerges from that game, I like their chances of winning it. Iowa's played as well as any team in the league recently, and also these teams only played once. Okay, get this, January 19th they played. 46-48 was the score of that game. Yeah. For both teams, their least amount of points this whole season. Ugly, ugly game. I don't expect that, assuming they meet again. I guess I'll take that back. Rutgers had 48 another game against Merrimack early in the season. Just think of where they started, how poor they were, and how well they've had, how well of a season they've had. So I'm looking forward to that matchup. That was a game that neither team could really get going. There was some very questionable calls.
Yeah.
Keegan Murray got called for a foul on Ron Harper Jr., who really struggled that game but had some clutch shots, which he's done throughout this year, and made some big free throws to give them the lead. And then Keegan Murray missed a shot at the buzzer, full court pass. So I'm just really looking forward to that matchup. I think either team that wins that game really has a lot to play for and could win it all.
Yeah, because they would, in theory, play Illinois if chalk holds. And I'm curious about the Illini motivation. Remember, last year they felt they got screwed, which they did to nobody's fault, out of a regular season title, and felt they had to win that Big Ten tourney. And then were disappointing in the NCAA tournament. Maybe their motivation isn't quite there this year in Indy in the same way, and they'd be more focused on the NCAA tournament, which would mean that Rutgers-Iowa winner would have a slightly easier path potentially.
Motivation and momentum is so big in a tournament like this. Some teams, might be playing for a little bit more. I think Rutgers, Iowa, they could win a Big Ten title. That's a lot to play for. We'll see how all these teams come out and how they shoot the ball and who gets momentum.
How about a player to watch? A guy that, like I said, could be a Dwayne Washington that we saw last year for Ohio State take over a tournament. Who's the guy you're most interested in keeping an eye on?
I think it's Jaden Ivey. As talented as anyone in the league, really struggled there against IU their last game. 2 for 11, only 1 assist, 3 turnovers. Frankly, looked a little disinterested even at times. Just didn't look like he was quite engaged like he needs to be, because when he's dialed in, when he's confident, when he's assertive, man, he can do whatever he wants on the court. He gets to wherever he needs to go, can make plays from there. He's the guy that I'm just waiting to really break out as an individual. There was a moment in time this season where he was in consideration, I think, for Player of the Year after he had some monster games.
Sure.
And over the past few weeks, he's kind of fell back. Now, he was first team, but I just don't know how he feels about Johnny Davis and Keegan Murray and Kofi Cober really kind of taking center stage in terms of who's the best player in this league. I'm thinking Jaden Ivey could bust out this weekend.
Well, that'd be interesting. Purdue strikes me as a team that is going to be thrilled when they don't have to play Big Ten opposition. You know what I mean? Because the league, I feel like Illinois in a similar way, the league has sort of, not like figured them out, but they don't seem as crazy as if you're whoever they're meeting up in the tournament who has 2 days to prep for a couple 7-footers. That's very different than a Big Ten opponent who's been watching you all year. I'll give you one more name to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised if Ron Harper has a big tournament.
I like it.
Right?
As clutch as anybody.
Yep. If there's going to be a game-winning shot, he's going to be the one to take it.
I'm giving him the ball, for sure.
All right, so we did player to watch. I teased you earlier about a team that...
You always tease me, Mike. Come on, man.
You're Big Daddy. How about a team that is your favorite? Who do you think will win it all?
I think Purdue. They've lost 2 of 3, have not been playing great, but I like their draw. They're not losing to Wisconsin 3 times in a row. If it holds true and they play each other in the semis, this is a championship level team that I just feel like has underachieved a little bit. It's kind of sounds strange to say about a Matt Painter team where you think of they're overachievers, they're gritty, they're tough. And I don't know, call me crazy because I don't know if this team has been that this season, but I do think they're primed, like Jaden Ivey as an individual, as a team to have a great weekend, to get some momentum, building that towards the NCAA tournament. They're deep. They got different lineups they can throw at you. I like that in a tournament setting. Eric Hunter Jr. has been playing much, much better. They're close to home. I like Purdue's chances going into this weekend.
It does feel they've got, if I mentioned Illinois maybe doesn't have something to prove, I feel like Purdue does. They might have that chip, because what is it, 6 losses they end the year at, and they've been talked as a Final Four team throughout the whole season. They might have more motivation than one of the other seasons. I think Wisconsin's going to be really dangerous. I mean, they've been dangerous all year. They won the regular season.
I'm always just overlooking Wisconsin. Of course they're dangerous. I mean, they're so disciplined. They're so good. You got Johnny Davis, Player of the Year. Despite losing that game to Nebraska, of course they're going to be dangerous. But for my money, I'd say Purdue.
It is interesting. Last thought on the Badgers, that in the beginning of the year, what if I would have told you Greg Gard Coach of the Year, Johnny Davis Player of the Year, Wisconsin wins the regular season, tied with Illinois.
No way
you would have seen that coming. Okay, so if it's not Purdue, which is they're the top 3 seed, give me a dark horse. Give me somebody we're not talking about that could win the whole thing.
Well, I don't know if they're a dark horse, but I got to go with Iowa.
Okay.
Even though they're not in that, they don't get the 2-round bye. They've played as well as anybody in the last 6 weeks or so. They had 1 loss in February to Michigan. They avenged that. We'll see if they can win and maybe avenge a loss to Illinois. I love the makeup of this team. I love how they play. How they play. It's free. It's aggressive. They're no longer just this offensive juggernaut, but they have a grittiness on the defensive end that I don't think we've seen from an Iowa team in recent years. Tony Perkins has really emerged. I thought he had his best game of his career against Illinois. He goes for 17 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. I mean, those guards just lived in the paint against Illinois. Really probably deserved that win, but they didn't make free throws. If they did, they would have got that win. So I like this Iowa team. I love the chip that they play, the chip on their shoulder that they play with. And here's the thing. Every player that steps on the court just seems to play to their strengths. And because they play to their strengths, there's a freedom and a confidence that every guy, whether it's Peyton Sanford coming in, whether it's Aaron Eulis, everybody knows their roles, plays their strengths. Then you got Keegan Murray, who was my player of the year. So I like this team.
Yeah, I like that pick. And they're not in a double bye. They're in the bye window, so they'd have to win 4 games in 4 days, which has happened only 3 times.
Here's one thing. That 4th game will be really difficult. I think you have an advantage if you had 1 game under your belt. So these teams that play, even on Wednesday, I think there's a slight advantage when they get into Thursday. They've been in that arena. They've seen some shots go through the hoop. Now it'll catch up to you later in the week if you keep winning. But for that next game, I think there's an advantage.
I will say, not as a dark horse to win the tournament, but a thing I wouldn't have thought I'd say 2 weeks ago. A team nobody wants to play is Nebraska.
Scary. They are scary right now, for sure.
Think about that. They're 1-16 to start off conference play. Now they've won 3 in a row, 2 of them on the road against ranked teams. And the last one was without their best player, Bryce McGowan.
And hopefully he's back. I think there's some optimism that he could be back. That's a big key. But Alonzo Verge has been playing as well as anybody in recent games. They have nothing to lose at all. And they're playing with the ultimate kind of freedom. They're loose. They're having fun. I feel like Alonzo Verge is back at the park just hooping and making plays for his teammates, making plays for himself. Very, very dangerous team.
Something that's almost a guarantee is there's going to be close games. And
you know it.
A lot of them. Not just because, it's that tense environment and everything, but here's your big stat for the day. The most Big Ten games decided by 3 points or fewer the last 2 decades was this year. 28 times the conference has had a 3-point or less game. And that's not even including, by the way, overtime matchups, which might have been ended with someone winning by 7 or 8 points, but were tied at the end of regulation. It's even bigger when you look at 6 points or less, which is 2 possession games. Been a really, really close year in the conference. Mike DeCourcy has released his latest bracket, and here's what he has for Big Ten teams. Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, and Iowa are all top 5 seeds. Ohio State and Michigan State seem to be pretty comfortably in. Then you get to bubble territory. An 11 seed or a 12 seed is definitely a bubble team, and Indiana right now DeCourcy has as the first 4 out. So that makes for a fascinating storyline in the tournament because we're maybe usually have 1 bubble team, sometimes 2, to have 3 Big Ten teams where a loss this week in Indy is going to make them go, oh boy, and a couple wins is going to make them feel gooder? Make them feel better about their position. That's pretty rare right now. So let's go team by team. Let's start with the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. We all know their story. They've had a ton of great wins and way too many bad losses early in the season. What do you think they need to do this week in Indy?
Wow, I thought they had this wrapped up, but I'm not the bracketologist. It sounds like you don't like to see an 11 or 12 next to your name. You know you're flirting there, and depending on how other conference tournaments shake out, you could be on the wrong side looking at this tournament, NCAA tournament. So Rutgers, all right, I think the key for them is one, can you put another win? Can you put another quality win under your cap as you advance? That's really key. I think the most important thing for them is on the defensive side, that's where they got to hang their hat on. This has got to be a grit. Don't forget who you are. And we're looking at Cliff Omori right here. This is a guy that I think is undervalued. We talk about all these other different players. Caleb McConnell, Defensive Player of the Year. But on the defensive end, he's terrific. And when he's a factor offensively, it can take them to another level. And then the other guy who's a key for Rutgers, Paul Mulcahy. When he's making plays for them, we saw him go on that stretch here earlier this season where he was playing as well as anybody in the Big Ten, getting his teammates involved, but also scoring for himself. This is a guy, big guard. When he's playing at a high level, Rutgers is a top 20 team.
So here's some things to remember when we look at it. The conference record, they don't even look at that. So the fact that Rutgers is 12-8 in the Big Ten, that matters to the Rutgers fan and to Big Ten fans. That is not in the room. They don't look at conference records. They do look at your overall record. 18 wins is pretty good, but you don't feel great about it. And quad 1 wins are a big deal. They've got 6 of them. There's a lot of teams they will be compared to nationally that don't have anywhere near 6. The quad 3 and 4 losses, you saw the Lafayette, they're 318 in the net. That's the albatross that's hanging over their head. Quad 3 or 4 losses for Rutgers is what is so hard for them to overcome. But they've had so many good wins, which is why they're in this conversation in the first place.
You got to value those good wins.
Right.
And I want to just touch on a little bit more for this team where I think they need what they need to do to be at their best. And remember who you are, Rutgers Scarlet Knights. You're not a pretty team. I don't care if you got a double bye. I don't care if you got 4 next to your name in the Big Ten standings. This, you got to remember, you're an underdog. You're not respected like the other guys. You're new to this conference. Almost take on this, have this chip on your shoulder. That's when they're at their best. Remember who you are. And I said discipline on defense. Okay, defense, they got to be engaged. They got to be disciplined. They got to be connected. And then on offense, it's almost the opposite. And I think this rings true for everybody, but none more so than Rutgers. Offense, you got to play free. You got to play reactive. You got to play with your instincts. And that's a shift that they have to, I think, embrace. And nobody more so than Paul Mulcahy. Mm-hmm. Defensively, he's got to be great. But offensively, when he's playing well, he's really that straw that stirs everything for Rutgers. That's going to be key for them.
You know the last time, so Rutgers made the NCAA tournament last year. You know the last time they made it back-to-back years? They've only done it one time, 75 and 76. Wow. So that's what they're facing, the historic nature. If they are in or if they need a win or two to get in, that's what they're hoping to do. Only the second time in program history the Scarlet Knights can do that. So that's one bubble team. The other 2 bubble teams are extra interesting because they play each other right away. We start off with the Michigan Wolverines. Mike DeCourcy's last bracket was just a couple days ago, and Michigan and Indiana's 12 and 11 were switched. So again, it's not just what they do, it's what all the other teams in the country do, and all of a sudden a win that was quad 1 becomes quad 2, etc. But what Michigan can only control is what they do this week in Indy. What do they need to do in Indy?
And the intriguing thing, the fascinating thing is these teams play each other. So what does Michigan need to do? Well, there's a lot of different storylines. Now you have Coach Howard, Juwan Howard back. Phil Martelli did a great job. Michigan's got to get out of this skid over the last 9 games. Win, loss, win, loss. They have not been able to string 2 wins together for 6 weeks or so. So can they do that after that great win at Ohio State? Can they refocus, be re-engaged? You got your head coach back and get a win against a team that's going to be fighting like everything to get that win as well. For Michigan, what I've loved to see, though, recently for them is Devontae Jones, point guard, has been playing at a high level. And for him, it's all about making decisions off ball screens. He can score it himself, but then it's getting his other teammates involved as well. In the second half against Michigan, he was phenomenal. You see him there spraying the ball out for the 3. And then Moussa Diabate on defense. Here, he spent most of that night guarding E.J. Liddell, but you saw him against Malachi Branham switching out, blocking shots, being active. He's a great defender. He's really improved in his consistency. That's very important for Michigan.
So you look at Michigan, again, 17 wins is not great. Their quad 1, 5 wins is great. But the committee will also look at the 9 losses they had because they'll be going up against, for example, a small conference team who might have only had 3 chances to play quad 1 competition. So they will consider that. Right now, Mike DeCourcy has them as an 11 seed. You know, what's funny is they were, a preseason Big Ten title contender, and it just hasn't been that kind of season. But that does mean they have that potential. They could be an absolutely dangerous team, not just in the NCAA tournament, but this week in Indianapolis as well.
I think there's no doubt. There's a number of great players in the Big Ten. Hunter Dickinson on any given night can be the best player. He's had a very good season. It's kind of flown under the radar almost because of what other players have done and because how poorly Michigan started. But I think what's I've been pleased with Michigan is the consistency of some of these other guys. Hunter Dickinson and Eli Brooks have had great seasons and have been consistent from day one. But it's Devontae Jones' emergence. It's Caleb Houston knocking down shots. It's Moussa Diabate, as we saw, being an impact player on both ends of the floor. To me, that's been what's key for Michigan because early on, there was no consistency, and it took Devontae Jones a while to find his footing at the Big Ten level, but he defends, he rebounds. When he's getting everybody else involved, it takes pressure off Eli Brooks, it takes pressure off Hunter Dickinson, and this is a team that has the athletes, has some depth too. I like when they play some of these freshmen, Frankie Collins, Kobe Buffkin, Terrence Williams had a great game against Ohio State. when their bench is playing well, too, it elevates their team as well.
And you brought up, too, you see it on the graphic, Juwan Howard returns from his 5-game suspension. That will be a fascinating storyline to follow throughout it. As Michigan, the last time they were not given an invite to the NCAA tournament was 2015. But perhaps to get it, they have to beat another team equally as desperate as they are. Now, you look at the two resumes, Indiana's not quite as good as Michigan. Michigan's a little bit better, but still, for Indiana, what do you want to see from them this week?
Well, can you regroup? You had 2 heartbreaking losses at home to Rutgers, on the road to Purdue. Both those games, they had the opportunity to win. Can they regroup? And, you're playing against probably, some of your Hoosiers fans there in Indianapolis, and you got to get this win. There's no doubt about it. They got to get this win against Michigan. What I want to see from them is defensively, they're great. Okay, they got to be strong defensively. But offensively, they got to play inside and out. They got to get the ball inside, whether that's through Race Thompson or Trace Jackson-Davis or Xavier Johnson, who's been playing another guard. I've talked about other guards who have been playing well. Xavier Johnson has been playing at an all-league level in recent weeks, been fantastic. You see what he did against Purdue, 18 points, 12 assists. And then can they knock down some shots? Got to get the ball in the paint first. Race Thompson, Parker Stewart, this is a team that's at the very bottom of the league in three-point makes. They gotta make some shots at a high level to get some wins.
For all we know, because we're not in that room, you look at the quad 1 wins being only 3. Maybe Indiana needs more than a win, right? I mean, their net is perfectly fine. The 18 wins is okay, but only 3 quad 1 wins. It'll be a good win by getting Michigan, but maybe they need one more. That's the fascinating thing about it is we're not in the room. And even if we were, it still depends on what everybody else across the country does in these final few days.
Yeah, so it does. And they can't control that. What they can control is, hey, one game at a time. They got to get this game against Michigan. There's no question about that. And then can you get another one against Illinois? I think that would for sure put them in. But first, got to get a win against Michigan. These two teams played, okay, and they've only played once. Maybe Michigan's best game of the season. Blitzed them, won by almost 20 at IU. Now, how does Indiana respond to that? And really, that game, I look at it, comes down to almost shooting. Yeah. I mentioned Indiana's poor shooting. They go 5 for 20 against Purdue. They would have won that game. Just hit 1 or 2 more threes. They got to win. Parker Stewart had an open 3 to take the lead in the closing seconds. They got to make some shots. Michigan in that game goes 11 for 17 from the 3. I thought was just they ran their offense. Indiana really didn't give them much resistance. It was a beautiful game for Michigan. Everybody seemed to play well. So IU has got to play much tougher and knock down some shots.
Do you agree they're the most desperate team in the Big Ten right now?
No question they're the most desperate. They're playing in Indianapolis, in their home state. I think this game tomorrow is just going to be a great environment. Both those teams are going to be battling. Should be a lot of fun. That's
the early game on the Big Ten Network. 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central Time will be a really fascinating environment. Tons of Hoosier fans there. Both teams desperately need it. And how about if their new coach gets them to the tournament, his first year there, it'll be the first time that storied program has been to the tournament since 2016. This week was a best-of-3 quarterfinal series in the Big Ten men's ice hockey tournament. This week, single elimination, win and move on, lose and go home, semifinals. Then next week, the 19th of March, championship game. It'll be hosted by the highest remaining seed, and there are your 4 teams left: Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, and Minnesota. Those semis come your way this Saturday. Paul Caponigri is here right now to break it all down, and there are some really interesting storylines with these 4 remaining teams. I'm assuming you're pretty pumped for this action.
I am. I mean, this Notre Dame-Michigan one's amazing because Michigan's been one of the best teams, if not the best, all year, and yet they have not beat Notre Dame in 4 tries. So is 5th time going to happen? I don't know. We'll see.
5th time's the charm. That's what the old saying goes. Let's start off with that matchup of Notre Dame and Michigan. So Michigan, if you just look at what they did last week, they won their 2 games, 12-1 combined score. I mean, they've been a high-scoring team all year, but 12-1 their last 2 games.
Yeah, and they own Michigan State, their big rival. They went 6-0 against them. That's, and Michigan State is down, but that's still not easy to do against your rival. So, yeah, they can score, but the one team that they have struggled with is Notre Dame. They've only scored 8 goals in the 4 games. Do the math. That's 2 goals a game. That has just not done it for them. So is it their Achilles heel? Can they finally get over the hump? We're going to see Saturday night. It should be fun.
How important will their defensemen be in this matchup?
It's huge because, they have a depth up front, but they're scoring. This is crazy on defense. Luke Hughes, the youngest freshman in the 40, has 17 goals. He broke the record at Michigan. It's insane. Nick Blankenberg has 14. And then, there's that Owen Power guy who only has 3, but he was the number 1 pick in the NHL draft last year. And in my mind, he's the best player in college hockey. So they need the scoring punch to come from everywhere. And with those D, they've done it all year. They've got to find a way Saturday to get some on Notre Dame to get over the hump, I think.
And luckily, it's not one guy. I think 4 of the top 5 points individually in the Big Ten are Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, they do have the offense. Don't get me wrong. I just think in a game like this, in a single elimination, when there's a lot on the line, you need those big guys to step up again on the back end. They've done it all year, so it wouldn't be a surprise oh, wow, they finally got scoring. They've been doing it all year. They just need to do it against Notre Dame. But you give Notre Dame a lot of credit. They play a very disciplined game. They make you work for everything. And Michigan is a run-and-gun team. I think that's where you get it. They've frustrated Michigan a little bit, making them try to work too hard.
Yeah.
They can't do everything so fancy. And I think that's where Notre Dame has gotten them.
And it's a battle of opposite strengths because Notre Dame leads the Big Ten in least goals allowed per game. So what's the key for the Irish?
The Irish keep it the same, right? I think getting a lead, obviously, they play really well with the lead. But they had success in this barn. Goaltending, Matthew Galite has been great. Transfer in, played at Cornell, was successful there. He's been great at Notre Dame. And then they get scoring from anywhere in their lineup. They don't rely on one guy. The Slaggert brothers are great, but they don't rely on just one guy. I think if they just stay with that momentum, they have some good scoring on defense too. But if they can, Yost is going to be rocking. They sold out that game in 15 minutes, I think. So it's going to be fun there on Saturday. Ben Holden and Fred Pletch will be there calling it, and I can't wait for that.
Let's get to the other matchup. You got Penn State and Minnesota. Minnesota, the regular season champions. I mentioned they were awesome last week with a bye. They looked flawless. Nothing wrong with them.
Yes.
What do you want to see from them against the Nittany Lions?
They just got to keep it up. You just hope for their sakes, they hope that they just keep going. Like the week off didn't rust them up. They had some injuries. Matthew Nyes played, but he was banged up from the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Ben Myers, though, has been incredible for them. He came back from those Olympics. They flew back, landed in Happy Valley, who they're playing, that Friday from China, or however, China to wherever they got there. And he played the next day and got two or three assists and was named a third star of the week in the Big Ten. So he hopped right back in there. He's a captain. They have other guys, Brock Faber, Walker, McLaughlin. They have tons of players, but Ben Myers is the key to that team in the non-goalie aspect of it, because he's a captain. He leads them in so many ways besides points, like just leadership on the ice, the way he handles himself, face-offs, all that good stuff. He's the key.
You said the non-goalie aspect.
Well, you can't.
What about the goalie aspect?
This story is insane. In early January, their guy leaves and signs the NHL, Jack LaFontaine. They didn't really have, or they thought they didn't have much of a second option, but Justin Close. People who don't know, he was a recruited walk-on. He was, a third-string goalie, expected to probably never play. But Jared Moe leaves, transfers to Wisconsin. Jack LaFontaine, you can't blame him. Sure. Carolina needed a goalie. They're going to throw NHL money at you. He was his fifth year. I don't blame him, but that left it to Justin Close, and I think he's exceeded everyone's expectations. And you know what? I've found from just kind of getting to know him, learn about him a little bit, he just seems like he has the temperament. He came there and said, hey, coach, I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. If it's third string for the rest of my career, that's fine. If I get to play, I'll be ready. And I think that attitude has just kind of made him ready for this moment. And he's clearly taken advantage of. He's 11-3 in his 14 games.
1.7 goals against average.
That's pretty good.
For Close. Pretty darn good. Now, that being said, on paper, it's a mismatch, but Penn State was on paper supposed to lose to Ohio State in their last meeting, and they're the first Big Ten team to win as the road team in a quarterfinal, best of three. Yeah. They haven't been doing it for decades or anything, but still, they're the first team to do it. If they pulled off the upset last week, how can they do it this week?
Yeah, and the one thing about that, too, is the Big Ten this year, the top four was so separated from the bottom three. It was like 25-point difference. So it wasn't as if a 4 or 5 seed there, Penn State, was that close to Ohio State when they did it. For Penn State, now one of their wins on the road this year did come at Mariucci, so they should have a little confidence going in there knowing that they won a game there this year. That's one way that they should have some confidence. The other is they're another team that their scoring and everything is very spread out. So they're not reliant on one guy to be like, okay, we need this line or this guy to play well. If they play well as a group like they did last weekend, and Liam Soulier, their goalie, that for me has always been a Penn State question mark when they're not doing well, is their goaltending's just been okay. Whereas other teams have had elite goaltending. Ohio State this year, Michigan this year, Minnesota, Justin Close came on the way he has. If they can he played really well against Ohio State. If he can play well Saturday, it's one-shot game.
Right.
This is it. If they get all the moons aligned in one night, play a lot like they did last weekend, they can pull the upset.
And they get shots on goal. I mean, they average 6 more shots on goal than everybody else in the league.
I saw something on Twitter. It was kind of funny. The guy said, "Oh, the game hasn't started yet." Right? Obviously, he's like, "Oh yeah, already Penn State has 7 shots on goal in the first period." Just joking, saying like,
which is not true.
No, but they come out of the box firing, and they will get a ton of shots. It's just a matter of the quality, right?
Right.
They did get to Justin close. The one game that Justin didn't play that well was in Happy Valley. They had a 3-0 lead in the first period.
Yeah.
Penn State. But Minnesota woke up and ended up scoring 6. But Liam Soulier did not play in that game. It was senior night, so Oscar Audio had played, so should be a different game on Saturday.
And a young Penn State team. A lot of freshmen that have been. Lugris had that game winner.
He came in halfway through the year and then scored 2 big goals for them.
Wasn't even on scholarship to start off the season.
No, well, they didn't. They brought him in the second half of the year because they felt like they needed another forward. He fit the bill. We talked to Guy Godowski about it, the head coach, and he's got the skill. It just took a little time. You come in the middle of the year to a college hockey, you're going to the next level. Your speed goes up, the strength of the players. He figured it out, and from what I say, he's a smart guy, and he said he learned some things and then scored on a shot where he learned the goalie might come over. So smart guys, I think they're always winning out in college. So you never know. He could be the guy. It could be Copeland, could be one of the other guys. I mean, that's what makes them dangerous, is they're spread out, and anybody could be the hero.
It's all coming your way this Saturday, the semifinals of the Big Ten Men's Hockey Tournament. Don't miss it. It's presented by Rocket Mortgage. Michigan and Notre Dame, followed by Minnesota and Penn State. Our coverage begins Saturday, 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app.